As promised, here's the video for the eFields and Potential Lab. And we are, of course, going to be making use of the simulation, but there were two parts in particular that people were struggling with, and that was the Google Sheets parts. So that's part E in part 1 and part D in part 2. And if you're wondering part E and part D, what am I talking about? Well, I went through and I added some letters to make it a little easier to reference. So the part that we're interested in right now is this part here. Part E, and with the sensors and tape measure tools in the simulation, measure the E field of a single positive charge along the horizontal arrow line every 50 centimeters from the center of the charge. Now I changed that. It did say 5 centimeters. My apologies to anybody who went through and was trying to do 5 centimeters. That was a little ridiculous. So I changed it to 50 centimeters. And you should get at least 6 data points, and you got to graph this in Google Sheets, and you got to create a power series trend line. So, and then identify what the exponent is for that power series. So let me go over how to do this. First, when you're here and you're doing this, you want to have the value showing. And personally, I think it helps to have the grid showing. You don't have to do that, but I like the grid. So then we're going to take our positive charge and put it in here. Now we want these arrows to be horizontal, so I gotta adjust this, and that looks pretty close. There we go. That's pretty good. And I've tried to center it on that one line there. I don't think it's quite centered. Maybe I could mess with it a little, try and get it better. It looks pretty good. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is down here in the bottom right, there's an arrow here, and it says 1 meter. Okay, so when you have this grid line showing, you can see it's easy to tell, how far a meter is and how far 50 centimeters is. So essentially one box, not one of the small boxes, but one of the big boxes is 50 centimeters. So if I take the sensor and I bring it up here and I put it right there, that's 50 centimeters away. And so you put it on there, and you get the data. So that's 50, and you'd record that. And then you go to 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. And you would just record those data points. And you want to record those data points in your Google Sheet. And I've already done that, actually. I've already created my Google Sheet here. So you can see I've got a distance, and I put the units, centimeters, and I've got my E field, volts per meter. And I've put the values that I got when I went and took the measurements. And so now I want to create a chart. So to create the chart, you want to go to Insert. That's up here at the top. So I click Insert, and then you can see about halfway down, Chart. So I'll click Chart. So I want to insert a chart. And right away, it's inserted this chart for me. Now, you should always check that it's made the right kind of chart. We want a scatter chart. So thankfully, it's already done that for me. And, everything roughly looks right. You can see my axes are already labeled. It's titled appropriately. I've got an appropriate scale. So I really don't need to mess with anything else. But if you ever were making a graph, you might, outside of this particular lab, but, sometimes you do have to mess with that stuff. But right now, I don't need to. I want to go to Customize. You can see there's Setup, which is underlined in green. I want to touch Customize, click over there. And then you want to go to Series. You see there's Chart Style, Chart and Axis Titles, Series, Legend, Horizontal Axis, Vertical Axis, Grid Lines, and Ticks. We want Series. So open that up and scroll down until you see Trend Line. Well, that's what we want. We want Trend Line. So I'll click that. Now, it's already done a trend line, but at least in this case, the default was linear. We don't want linear. We want a power series. So it's a drop-down menu. Click on that, find power series. Okay, and now you can see my trend line has changed. That's great, but we're not done yet. You need to scroll down a little further to where it says label. And for label, we want to use equation. And you're going to see the equation pop up on the graph when I touch this. There's the equation. You can see a little legend showed up, and you can see, so there's the dark blue dot that represents my individual data points, and then the light blue line, there's the the equation, the trendline equation, and it says 90,000 and then x raised to the -2 power. So that's the power, -2, that's what I would put in. So that's how you go through Google Sheets. So you have to do this for the E fields. And then you also, let me go back to this, in part 2, scroll down to part 2, actually let me minimize this, that makes it easier. There we go. In D, so this part here, we need to do it again, only this time we're doing it for potential. And it says, along the center of a single positive charge, again, we're doing 50 centimeter steps, you need at least 6 data points, okay? And so when you're doing this, you go up here, we've got our single positive charge, so I can just leave it right there. But I want to measure the voltage. The yellow sensor measures, you can see there, it's measuring the volts per meter. That's the E field. I don't want the E field now, so I'll move the sensor back. I'll use this, and now I want to measure the volts. And so, 50 centimeters, so that's about 50, so 18 volts. And then, just continue moving it down and recording the data. And then once you've done all that, you'd come back over here. Again, you'd put your data in. I haven't put the data in. I'm going to leave that for you to do, but you would make a new chart. You might make a new whole sheet if you want to, or you could just put the data in a separate part of your spreadsheet, but you would enter that and you would make a chart using the same procedure that I just did when I was doing the E field. The procedure here in Google Sheets doesn't change. Right? It's just that you need to label things appropriately. In this case, it would be potential instead of E field. But that's how it works with the Google Sheets. The last thing I did want to mention has nothing to do with Google Sheets. It has to do with down here. I've gotten a bunch of questions for this H. So this one here, H, people asking about the work. This really isn't supposed to be anything complicated. For the work, you're just going to take the charge they give you, which is this 1 nanocoulomb. You're going to take that and you're going to multiply that by your answer for G. So just the charge times the potential difference there is going to give you the work. That's the idea. Of course, make sure you convert your charge to coulombs before you do that calculation. All right, so those are the big things that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, if you have questions about anything else with regards to the lab, feel free to ask. Remember, I pushed the due date back to Thursday, but I always recommend get it done as soon as possible. But yeah, it's been pushed back to Thursday to give people a chance to see this video and make sure they can process everything and get it done.